Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old-timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to today's show. It is the week before Christmas, and all through the house. No, seriously. Probably, I normally, in years past, would have just let this podcast go for 2 weeks because, see, the next podcast, I actually record these on Sunday evening and release them on Monday, so that would mean I would be, if I'm not mistaken, it would be what? Christmas Eve when I'd be recording and then releasing it on Christmas Day. And I'd always think, nobody's going to listen to my podcast on Christmas. Well, Thanksgiving this year, I went ahead and did a Thanksgiving podcast, and wow, a lot of people listened to it. I mean, like a lot more than normal. And what I came to realize is, some people are traveling, the day before a holiday, and it's a good thing to listen to a podcast, or they're traveling the day after, and it's a good thing to listen to a podcast. Some people, you're with your family, and they kind of get on your nerves, or maybe the kids are all watching Christmas movies, or, especially Thanksgiving football games, and maybe you're not into football, Anyway, you just kind of need a comfortable break from your surroundings, or maybe like me, kind of on your own, and the holidays can be quite a bit lonely, and you just want something to take your mind off of things. And so, what I realized is it's kind of a good thing for me to put out a podcast, even if it's like, the day before Christmas or something like that. So I will do one. And one more before Christmas, and it'll be herbs. We'll get into herbs, and on the Christmas special, I guess you would call it, when I do a podcast that falls close to Christmas, I always try to do a story, a family story. I'm actually was trained as a professional storyteller. The Hicks family, Ray and Arville, I used to travel around telling stories with them. I guess you could say I apprenticed under them as a storyteller, just as I did under Rosie Hicks as an herbalist. And usually I would, I guess the one time in the past 3 years I did a Christmas special, it was telling you the story of Christmas at the Hicks family home. And that's still in the archives if you want to hear it. That was tough. Oh my gosh, that was tough. Remembering going up there as a kid, spending time with them, telling you about Ray's funeral and this rooster that was strutting around, and it was just like so appropriate because Ray was such a colorful character. I almost broke down 15 times. If you listen to that show, you will hear me like, cut this part out, cut this part out. I was choked up through the whole thing. But that was, still in the archives, and I got another story in mind for the next podcast. Well, if you've read a couple of my books, you might have heard this references to this story before. I'm going to give you the full story about my grandfather, who really taught me the meaning. There I go again. Holidays are tough, they're tough for everybody. taught me the meaning of Christmas. But I think I can probably get if I get it out of my system now, I'll probably be better next week. So look forward to that if you're interested. Of course, we'll talk herbs and we'll talk recipes. So let's just go ahead and jump right into the recipes. Oh, I really should say I can't take any more orders for spoons and such, the carvings and baskets I do for Christmas. I've got one last order to fill, and I'm going to fill this last order, and then I'm not going to mail anything out anymore this next week as a Christmas gift. Now, if you want to order something that will be after, you're going to expect it to arrive after Christmas, that's fine. Go ahead and order it. And this is actually really cool. I'm just going to mention this and we'll get on with the show. This last week, I had some work to do around the house, and I found some boxes that have been stored away for like 20 years. Seriously. And in them, I found some of my great-grandfather's hand tools. A draw knife that actually he etched his initials into. A Cooper's adze, which was similar to a shipwright's adze. He would have been using these actually in house building in the 19-teens, the 1920s. I mean, he was born in 1890, and no, I'm sorry, he was born in what was it, 1890 or 1880? Could have been 1880. Anyway, it was 1880 if I'm not mistaken, and lived to be a little more than 100 years old. So I actually got to know him as a child. And he's the one in my family that if you had to choose someone, who is Judson like? Well, he's a lot like his grandfather, and a lot like his great-grandfather. I was named for both of them. They were both Judsons, and both builders. And my grandfather taught me how to use those hand tools and a lot about carving, and he learned from his father, and he learned from his father, who learned from his father, and so I'm gonna start using my grandfather's draw knife with his great-grandfather's draw knife. I'm sorry, with his initials etched in it, probably more than 100 years old. And that adds, and some beautiful planes, especially the flat plane. That's one I'll use a lot in my work. He did a lot of intricate moldings and such in the houses he built. So there were planes that were used for molding. These are handmade from white oak. I believe they would. I don't know if at that time they were getting a lot of the blades and such from the local blacksmith, or if they were ordering the blades from the Sears catalog. But the the plane itself would be handmade from white oak. And I found a little keyhole saw and just different tools. But I picked them up, and my hands fit them perfectly. That's the thing when you have a good tool is a tool that one works well, but just two fits your hands. And my great grandfather was at least 6'2". I'm 6'4", so probably about the same height, same build. He was the Irishman. He was the joke-telling, always up to a practical joke, always telling stories, singing, smoking cigars. He was the most influential man in the community. He literally built a town, like built all the houses in it, and rented them out and sold them when the people could afford. He, give them mortgages, and so he built a whole town and around a railroad depot that he basically helped fund. And he was known as Mr. Ott. Odd name, I know, right? But my family came from Ott County, Ireland. And so his name was Oddie. And everybody, he was everybody's friend. Everybody loved him. Everybody respected him. He was, a quite wealthy man. Had lots of farms and lots of people who worked for him. And he was literally the hinge upon which a community hung, I guess you would say. And a real character. And my grandfather was the same way. He really did follow in my great grandfather's footsteps. And he raised a great family, founded a church, raised, just a wonderful family. And then my great grandmother passed away, and he remarried in his 80s and had another family. And I mean, he was just as vibrant and strong as any man could be. And so, starting this week, I get to begin using his tools, which fit my hands as if they've always been there, to make things, to make wooden bowls and cutting boards, with the plane. That'll be perfect. The draw knife I'll be using on both, and spoons, and all kinds of things. So basically, I found a box of tools that my grandfather set aside for me 40 years ago. Oh, and there are auger bits. I mean, all kinds of stuff. I mean, I'm going to do stuff with this like you can't believe. Just a really nice collection. I mean, more than what I've said. Chisels, gouges, augers, everything a carpenter would have used circa 1900. And saws, lots of saws. Got some nice saws. So my grandfather set these aside for me before he died, probably about 40 years ago. And I just found them. And this week I get to start using them and making items, handmade, heirloom quality items to sell to y'all and others who appreciate, handmade items. So here on the week before Christmas, I think I just got the best Christmas present I've ever received in my entire life. I feel like they're literally right here beside me. And now I better go get on with the show because I can't keep talking about this much longer. All right, so let's talk about food. All right, it's Christmas time, and I love to snack. I'm a snacker, especially during the holidays. The big meals are great. I look forward to the big meals, but the snacks, these are the things I look forward to all year. I love my appetizers. I love my hors d'oeuvres. So in past shows, I've given you my recipe for holiday pate. Well, I'll just run through it again in case this is the first time you've ever heard the show. And if it is, normally I'm not. I'm laughing through the whole thing. I'm not emotional. So, first of all, we'll just run through the liver pate. And this is in my book, The Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking. Now, you can make excellent liver pate out of chicken livers. Now, I imagine, this recipe really comes more from the French side of my family. And in French pate, certainly goose liver is the preferred. Very few people raise geese these days, and it's like impossible to buy goose liver or foie gras, at least in any grocery store I know of in North Carolina. Maybe a fresh market might have some seasonally, but that's about it. And duck liver may be a little more common because they raise so many Peking ducks up in New Jersey. Really, that's not going to be the best. If you have a hunter in your life, that's how you're probably going to get most of your duck and goose liver. Everybody has access to chicken liver. I love chicken liver, but the thing is, a lot of chickens are not raised right these days. They're raised in the big chicken houses, the things Joel Salatin are always ranting about, the stinking facilities you can smell from miles away. There is one commercial chicken producer that I know of that actually raises chickens the right way, and it's Springer Mountain Farm. The guy's name who runs it is Gus. I've talked about him before. I've spoken with the guy. He's a really decent guy. He does a lot for charity. He's a very strong Christian, and he really is humane and cares about the quality of life of his chickens and about the quality of chicken for his customers, and that makes a world of difference. Springer Mountain Farm chicken is the very best chicken you can get if you don't raise it yourself or buy it from, a neighbor who does. And the livers of these chickens taste as clean and nice as can be. They don't have any smell. I mean, they're just good, okay? So I'm going to recommend Springer Mountain Farm chicken. No financial interest in this whatsoever, okay? I'm just going to say that's if I buy chicken liver, that's what I'm going to buy. If you can get a duck or goose liver, even better. But it will literally work with any kind of poultry liver. And I've even seen old recipes using rabbit liver. So really, a mix of rabbit and turkey liver was very common in early America. I've never done that myself. I give it a try sometime. Just, if you're raise your own rabbits, they're probably good to go. If you're a rabbit hunter, if you hunt anything, always look at the liver to judge the health of the animal. If it's spotted, if it's discolored, if it doesn't look right, don't eat the meat. Bottom line. And I think that may be actually especially true in rabbits. So let's get on to the recipe. So you can use literally any poultry liver you like. A fattier liver is best, but I have qualms with the way commercial foie gras is raised. I don't think it's humane. If it's not from backyard chickens, I'll go with Springer Mountain Farm chickens. And for this recipe, I'm going to use about a half pound of chicken livers. Now, I can go down to Piggly Wiggly when I'm in the eastern part of the state. It's my favorite store to shop in, except for Home Foods in Rayford, North Carolina. If you ever stop in Home Foods, you're going to find a real old-fashioned country grocery store. It's in Rayford. It's near Fayetteville, kind of middle of nowhere, one of the least populated counties in North Carolina. You'll find a couple who's probably around 40 years old. I think he's the fourth generation to own the store, and they do things right. He butchers his own meat in the shop, makes his own sausage, goes to the coast 2 or 3 times a week and brings back seafood. They buy produce from local farmers. Wonderful people. And they own the hardware store next door. They actually have pet chickens that wander around the hardware store, little bantam roosters and such. And they have a little cafe where they take, the food from the fresh local produce and they cook lunches for people. A little takeout window and with some picnic tables. And it's one of probably the best. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say it's the best grocery store in North Carolina. They will go out of their way to get you what you want. It is a place where it's what they call a majority-minority town. Most folks there are going to be black or Lumbee Indian, a lot of Mexicans. The white folks there are just, legitimate rural country people. Everybody is. And you're just going to go in there and, hang out and listen to people talk about their families and hunting and high school football. And it's like walking back in time 100 years. And literally, that was what it was like 100 years ago in most rural North Carolina towns. People were too poor to worry about segregation. They worked together, they hung out, they knew each other's families, and I mean, they were just, all working on farms together. And that's the way it was when I was growing up, and probably a lot more so in my great-grandparents' generation. I always say the only time people divided was on Sundays when white folks went to white churches and black folks went to black churches and Indian folks went to Indian churches. In the afternoons, we'd all get together and play baseball together or go hunting or fishing or, Anyway, the South is not as it's portrayed on television. I can guarantee you that. So, you get a half pound of, let's say, chicken livers, but whatever poultry livers you want. Wash them. Trim them up if necessary. If you're buying store-bought, you don't have to trim them a whole lot. Other things you're going to need: 2 boiled eggs. Again, use any poultry egg you like. Half cup chicken broth or other poultry broth. At least 4 tablespoons of butter. At least. And I would probably use more like a stick because I like a lot of butter. A good half cup finely chopped onion or shallot or allium of your choice, as I always say. At least a pinch of parsley, and I'm probably going to go more like a teaspoon because I love parsley. Good shot of brandy or bourbon. Salt and pepper to taste. If you're, you could probably use sherry or something if you didn't want the brandy or bourbon. And I suppose if you really had an aversion to alcohol, you could leave it out, but it's really going to suffer for it. I mean, it's holidays, it's Christmas. Throw in a shot of brandy. It's not going to hurt anybody. Well, okay, maybe if someone's a hardcore alcoholic and they really can't even have a drop of something, I get that. But yeah, I'm going to throw in a shot of bourbon probably, but brandy's more traditional. Salt and pepper to taste. A pinch of, let's say, a pinch plus or less of Christmassy spices. Nutmeg, cloves, stuff like that. Allspice if you wanted to. Cinnamon. I'm going to go with more nutmeg and clove because it's more my taste. And they go really well. But, I mean, both of those. Like you'll see nutmeg in any traditional like cream of spinach soup or even traditional macaroni and cheese recipes. It's not a weird flavor with savory things. And clove works better with onion than anything I can think of. Clove really, I mean, we think of it as a sweet spice, but it's fantastic with any allium. So I'm going to go with nutmeg and clove and a pinch of mustard powder. Mustard powder just kind of brightens it up. I like it. If I didn't have mustard powder, I'd probably use cayenne pepper. And just a couple of dashes of Worcestershire sauce to taste. So cook the livers in the broth, simmering about 10 minutes or so. And if you like mushrooms, you can absolutely add some chopped mushrooms, fresh or dry at this point. I do. I like mushrooms in mine. Drain but reserve the broth. We're going to need it in a minute. Mash the livers and boiled eggs and mushrooms if you're using them together into a very smooth paste. You can use a food mill or a food processor, but you can actually just do it with a fork if you're careful. It's what I usually do. Lightly brown the onions or shallots in butter, get them very soft. Add the onions, brandy, and a little broth at a time to the mashed liver mixture until you get the right consistency. Add the spices, taste as you go. Serve on crackers or toast. It's fantastic. You can substitute just about anything in this to suit your taste. Like I said, I will usually probably use bourbon. I'll add some hot pepper to it. Some people say Irish whiskey is a must, and I get that. It's a sweeter. If you like bourbon, Irish whiskey is a little sweeter than bourbon, basically. A little sweet wine like port or sherry or Madeira. Madeira is classic. That would have been used a lot in early America. Toasted pecans go really well. Now, sometimes I will make the exact same thing, but totally change the flavors and spices and do an Asian version using ginger and green onions like scallions and sesame oil. But to my taste for Christmas, that nutmeg and the clove and the brandy, and it just works, It's also absolutely fantastic to put in a terrine or a meat pie, like if you have some steak or a deer meat. Really, really good. So, yeah, that is the classic. Now I'm going to give you an alternative. Let's say you have some vegetarians in your family, or you just really love mushrooms, as do I. I am a mushroom fanatic. I live in the mountains where we get 270 days of precipitation on average per year. And even now, I am still finding some oyster mushrooms and such. This is super traditional and it's super tasty, and you're not going to miss anything in this. I like to have my liver pate and my mushroom pate, which in French is called Duxelles. Another old recipe that came down to the French side of my family. Duxelles is phenomenal. It is it's merely think the exact same way you did the pate. We're going to try to come up with something that looks and has the same texture as that, using mushrooms. Now I say vegetarian, not vegan, because it does have cream and butter in it, of course, being French. And I wouldn't wish veganism on my worst enemy. You either live, you only go through life once, and if if you do it right, once is enough. And to me, that includes, and that's actually a quote from Joe Barnett down in Washington, Georgia. He said, we eat right in the South, and because you only go through life once, and if you eat right, once is enough. Well, I think he's very right. He's actually probably a distant cousin of mine. He's the shrimp and grits champion, by the way. The perfect way to do anything with mushrooms is to make Duxelles. And it's merely a mix of really finely chopped, like pureed. For this, you might want to use the food processor or food mill, unless you got really good knife skills like I do, or a grater even. Chopped mushrooms cooked with shallots, garlic, butter, parsley, salt, and pepper. That's it. You just make a paste out of that. Add some cream to the right consistency. Both of these are going to taste better if you sit them in the refrigerator overnight. Now, let's say maybe even a little more common to your table and taste is something I absolutely have to have around the holidays, and it's a cheese ball. Now, don't ever buy a cheese ball from a store. They are so easy to make. Traditionally, they were made with any bits of leftover cheese you might happen to have. Chop them all up fine, figure out a way to bind them together, turn them into something you can spread on a cracker. Keep that in mind, and everything's going to be so easy. Now, here's the way I do it. Now, I love blue cheese. The funkier, the saltier, the stronger than flavor the blue cheese, the better. I mean, I'd go crazy over blue cheese. If you don't like blue cheese, substitute whatever cheese you like. Now, it's going to be difficult if you're using a really hard, dry cheese like Parmesan or Pecorino, but it can be done. Cheddar's a piece of cake. Really, what I like to do most often, and Swiss. I mean, Swiss is awesome. I mean, any, Emmental or Gruyere and all. I mean, I love that stuff. I mean, give me an Edam, Manchego. I mean, any of those, interesting cheeses, fantastic. But if you just did this with cheddar, you'd be fine. And you think it was, I'd love it. I'm not going to complain. But I like a mix, actually, of blue cheese and very sharp cheddar. That's really my favorite. I think that's probably sort of my English heritage coming out. They love to mix blue cheese and cheddar, especially with a little port wine and some nuts. And that's kind of where I'm going with this. This is the way I like to do a cheese ball. Basically, it's really easy for us, much more so than our ancestors, because we have cream cheese. Our ancestors had, I guess, Neufchâtel, but I mean, cream cheese, easy, cheap, and it can be a base for so many things. Don't use too much of it, though. Whenever I have like a bad cheese ball, it's because it's got too much cream cheese in it, and it just kind of sucks the flavor out of everything. Just think of cream cheese as a binder. So, take some blue cheese and cheddar if it's me, and I'm going to grate up my cheddar, and I'm going to crumble up my blue cheese, and I'm probably going to end up with about a cup of the real cheese, and then I'm going to blend that together with about half as much cream cheese. I think that's about right. About half as much. Enough so you can form a spreadable ball. That's all you want. Now to this, I'm going to add crushed garlic. You could use garlic powder. Garlic can really go bad. If I was going to have this around for a few days, I'd probably go with the garlic powder. But I'm going to go with crushed garlic. I'm going to put in there some chopped chives. Again, if this is one that's going to be around for a while, go with dried chives. I like some black pepper. Parsley is always a must for me. I think parsley brings out the flavor of stuff. So, fresh if you're going to eat it within the next week, or dried if you're not. That's it. Salt and pepper to taste. Mix it all together. Get it nice and smooth. Add a few dashes of Worcestershire sauce. So again, it's kind of my English heritage coming out, Give it a taste. If it tastes right, you're good to go. If it needs a little something, add whatever you think it needs. Now, the fun part of this is the next step. I usually will chop fine pecans, though more traditional is walnuts. Again, that's the English thing. And my grandparents on their farm had this huge black walnut tree. And my grandfather also planted pecans, so we use them pretty much interchangeably. He loved nut trees, and he planted a ton of them. And we had the most wonderful black walnut ice cream. I can't tell you how good that is. Pecan pies. So, I'm probably going to use pecans for this, because there are a lot of people around here that grow them, and I can get, good fresh ones that haven't been sitting around on a store shelf forever, but get what you like. Chop them up really fine. I do not roast my nuts for this. You can if you want. I don't think it's necessary. Mix that together with chopped up bacon. So we got nuts and bacon. Now I usually put some fresh parsley in with that. Roll the cheese ball in there, coat it with it, pack it in real good, and you're good to go. Another thing I would add that totally optional, most people would not add. I like this. Back when I'm making the cheese ball mixture, I'm going to throw in a few dashes of hot sauce. And when I do my mix of nuts and parsley and bacon, I'm going to add some Creole seasoning. That suits my taste. And yeah, that's really, really good. So I'll leave it there. That gives you really three fantastic savory snacks you can have around Christmas. And the reason I want to give you savory snacks is like everybody makes sweets, right? You're just bombarded with cookies and cakes and pies, and eventually you lose your taste for everything because you've had so much sweet stuff. Well, I like to balance that out with savories. So if you just kind of balance your sweets with your savories and then have, some citrus around, a nice little sour something to pick you up, a little bitterness. I mean, of course, in the South we have plenty of mustard and turnip and collard greens, so we don't lack the bitter element. If you do, get some Angostura bitters or whatever your favorite bitters formula is. Swedish bitters is a good herbal formula, and that'll keep your digestion kind of evened out. You won't get that like full bloated feeling and lose your taste for food and all that indigestion, all that stuff. Uh, People just really seem to overdo it on the sweets, and that's what causes the trouble. A little fresh salad never hurt anybody, but a cheese ball and some pate and Duxelles, well, let me tell you, that's going to keep me eating, no doubt about it. Hey, another great thing to have is some salted peanuts and some dried cranberries, dried cherries if you like. That'll give you a little acidity, a little bitterness, a little saltiness, and yeah, keep you going. And it's time to feast if you can, and be grateful. And if you can help somebody else out that can't feast, definitely time to do it if you possibly can. Now let's get into the herbs. Now, one I should have mentioned last week but didn't, actually ran out of time. It was under the grass category. It's Digitaria sanguinalis. That's a fancy name for crabgrass. Crabgrass, everybody's least favorite grass in the South. Several varieties grow in my region. I only know of medicinal use for the sanguinalis. Digitaria dactylon is like also listed as being similar to Bermuda grass, which we talked about last week, but under the Digitarias, I only found one brief mention. It comes from Plants for Future. It says medicinal use of crabgrass. A decoction of the plant is used in the treatment of gonorrhea, a folk remedy for cataracts and debility, and is also said to be emetic, which means it helps you puke. They didn't tell you how to use it. I don't know. I'm going to have to do more research on it. I'm going to have to experiment with it, but I don't think I really necessarily need one more thing to make me puke. And I would like to see how it helps with cataracts, so thank God I have no reason to use it for gonorrhea. Debility? I don't know. Okay, maybe next time I have the flu or something, I'm feeling weak afterwards, I could try and find some crabgrass and try to figure out how it works for debility. I have no idea. But the more interesting and more useful plant we're going to get into this week is also considered one of those common hated weeds, but it is one of the most useful herbs you're ever going to discover. Dioscorea polystachya, Chinese yam, also known as the cinnamon vine. In fact, how useful and medicinal is the Chinese yam or cinnamon vine thought to be, known to be? Well, look at the name. Dioscoreae. That's named for Dioscorides. I mean, they're saying, look, this is a medicinal herb. However, it was not known to the ancient Greek or herbal traditions of Western Europe. It was really not introduced into Western herbalism until somewhere around, well, I see it start showing up around 1800. Now, I do think it was probably in use a good 100 years or two before that, but it really starts showing up in Western herbal writing around 1800. Listed in Resources of the Southern Fields of Forest as an edible plant that could substitute for potatoes. In the eclectic school, which was, about the, probably, what would I say, with the eclectics going around 1850 or so. So it's going to be contemporary with that book that was published by the Confederacy. The Eclectic Materia Medica says, therapeutic action. The Dioscoreae is a diaphoretic anodyne with antispasmodic and antiemetic and is expectorant. So it helps with fevers, spasms, helps reduce nausea, unlike the grass we just mentioned, and helps rid the lungs of phlegm. It seems to act as a very gentle diaphoretic, which means helps break a fever essentially, without exciting the action of the heart and arteries or increasing the temperature of the body. It has been but little used, however, for this purpose, although it might undoubtedly be employed with much advantage. It appears to act as an anodyne and antispasmodic, and likewise as an antiemetic in diseases in which it has been principally employed. The only affection in which it has been used sufficiently to give fair test to its virtues is in bilious colic. In many instances it has appeared to act with great promptitude in allaying various cases of nausea and vomiting, and relieving the pain and spasmodic action invariably present in the disease. In various cases of great severity, where other remedies had been faithfully and perseveringly employed, and when all had proved unavailing, the nausea and vomiting, severe pain, and spasms continuing unabated, with a dry and husky state of the surface, the Dioscoriae has afforded entire relief in every respect in 20 or 30 minutes, and the patient has fallen into a comfortable state of repose and slept quietly for the first time since the attack. So I think we can understand why, when this herb came into common use, or somewhat common use, it's still barely known, they would name it after Dioscorides, because, I mean, it's obviously quite useful in some pretty acute symptoms. Resources of the Southern Field and Forest, as I said, tells us that Dioscoriae is of the yam tribe. And by the 1870s or so, it was growing fairly commonly in St. John's, around Charleston, South Carolina, and all the way down into Florida. In Griffith's Medical Botany, it was stated that a decoction of the root is eminently beneficial in bilious colic again. Once added to a pint of water and half of this taken as a dose, it says to act with great promptitude. And then Dr. Neville said he placed great reliance on the tincture as an expectorant, and likewise a diaphoretic, and in large doses an emetic. So in large doses it would actually cause you to throw up. Attention is invited to its employment, he stated. In the official U.S. dispensatory, as of 1898, King's Dispensatory, it was listed in the official U.S. dispensatory, probably I'm looking maybe around 1900, described by Professor Wood. But in King's Medical Dispensatory of 1898, it said, in former editions I have termed this agent an antispasmodic, and solely for the reason that it cures bilious colic. And by the way, bilious colic, I should have said earlier, is a gallbladder attack or gallstone attack when that causes great pain and vomiting and everything. So when they say biliary colic or bilious colic, they're actually talking about a gallstones or an inflamed gallbladder, actually. And I can the doctor goes on, and I can truly say that nearly all remedies have thus been classified, not from any positive knowledge of their action, but from the results following their administration. In other words, it hadn't been well studied, but the doctors of the time had found this to be a good remedy for gallbladder attacks, as they called them. A change of classification based upon the known action of remedies is certainly desirable, and I am glad to observe classification based upon the known action of remedies. And I am glad to observe that the attention of physicians has already been attracted in this direction. In other words, it was being studied by the medical community of the time. In absence of any positive knowledge concerning the action of Dioscoriae, perhaps it would be better to say that it is specific in bilious colic having proved almost invariably successful in doses of a half pint of decoction repeated every half hour. So essentially a tea made of the root of this variety of yam. Specific Diascorea may be given in 5-drop doses every 5 minutes. No other medicine is required, as it gives prompt and permanent relief in the most severe cases. In fact, it is not only in value of bilious colic, but in all forms of colic and other painful abdominal neuroses. They're saying for various gastrointestinal irritation. If it does not relieve in 1 hour, the medicine should be discontinued. It has allayed the pain incident to the passage of biliary calculi. In other words, it helped with the pain of the passage of a gallstone when given in full doses with Gelsemium. Now, Gelsemium is a plant we will get into another day. It is extremely dangerous. It was also considered to be very useful by herbalists circa 1890 to 1920. Okay, maybe even a little earlier. A very common plant. I'm going to be very careful talking about it because it could easily be misused, as it has a narcotic effect, and a small amount too much could kill you stone dead. So we're going to assume in this case Gelsemium has an opiate-like effect. So in this case, we're going to assume that it was being used for its antispasmodic properties, which would help, as Doc Jones would say, relax the tubes, open the tubes to help pass the stone, and for pain, because it is a very effective, much like an opiate. It's actually much like an opiate in many ways, but also has chemicals in it similar to, I'll have to double check, is it strychnine or cyanide? So you can, a little too much would not only give you something akin to an overdose of an opiate, but also a poisoning. So you can see how this plant, while it may be very useful and rather pleasant in its effect, could kill a lot of people if they started using it without knowing how to use it or their limits. So I'm going to be very careful when we get to Gelsemium, even though it's actually an herb I grow and use. I think it's very useful. It's a very beautiful plant too. It's actually the state flower of South Carolina. I will say this: I think the medical community should research Gelsemium as an alternative to opiates. Probably could do a lot, like with the OxyContin epidemic and the fentanyl epidemic, to help get people off the stuff, or have an alternative so they don't get hooked on opiates. Because to the best of my knowledge, there's only been one recorded case in the entire history of the use of this herb. So we're talking hundreds of years of documented medical science. One recorded case of one person who may have had an addiction to Gelsemium. And at the time, the doctors said, we've never seen this before. We didn't even know this could happen. And they were basically saying it was probably more of a psychological than a physical addiction. And it did lead to overdose and death. So, not to be played around with. But compared to fentanyl, compared to OxyContin, anyway. So, let's see. In fact, it's not only in, we just said all gastrointestinal irritation, and there, yes, so passing the stone with addition of Gelsemium. It also provided valuable and painful cholera morbus attended with cramps. In neuralgic affections, that's a pretty serious case of cholera. Irritable conditions of the nervous system, especially when attended with pain or spasm in spasmodic hiccup. It's always good to have a cure for hiccups, and the extract of this wild yam be a pretty innocuous, pretty safe way to help with hiccups. Obstinate and painful vomiting, gastralgia, and in one case of spasmodic asthma, and that's actually how I started looking at it. I found it to be listed in the old asthma remedies. But that is the spasmodic kind. I have trouble with that word. I don't have spasmodic asthma. I have inflammatory asthma. Um, Also in spasms of the bowels, likewise nearly all nausea. So Professor King effected a cure with it after several other means had failed. It would likewise allay nausea, spasm of the bowels, and combined with equal parts of the bark of cornus, that's going to be dogwood, and a decoction, is eminently beneficial in nausea and vomiting for pregnancy. You know, I always caution against any herbs being used during pregnancy, but circa 1898, this was found to be rather effective. Now, whether it caused bad effects, they didn't say. They may not have even known at the time. The root appears to exert an action especially upon enfeebled and irritable mucous tissue that becomes painful from spasmodic contractions of their muscular fibers. Hence its value in bilious colic, which again is gallbladder inflammation and stones. In painful dysentery, dysmenorrhea, the result of spasmodic irritation of the mucous membrane of the cervix uteri, and in spasmodic irritations of the gastric mucous membrane attended with pain, nausea, and vomiting. It is reputed useful in indigestion with hepatic derangement. It's essentially liver swelling issues, in liver inflammation, in chronic hepatic congestions, that's liver again, and in chronic gastritis of drunkards. So, someone's got like a constant upset stomach from drinking too much, it helps. It is also useful in after pains. In ordinary cases, the decoction of the root may be given in doses from 2 to 4 fluid ounces and repeated every half hour. Seems to be a fairly safe herb to use. I mean, I'm not really finding a lot of contraindications. They said for specific indications and uses, bilious colic. I can't tell you how many people get in touch with me asking me, is there anything you can tell me about herbs for gall issues, gallstones essentially? And I always say, I'm not a practicing clinical herbalist. I'm more of an educator. I'll give you some information. You follow up on it, and you treat yourself if you choose to. This one seems to be specifically good for those gall issues. In my experience, gallstones, gallbladder issues seem to be most common in women, and probably due more to the modern diet than anything else. This is something I learned from the herbalist Michael Moore, and I've done more research into it because I get asked about this a lot. The gallbladder needs to purge each morning to stay healthy. The gallbladder is stimulated to purge by natural fats, sour and bitter flavors, especially sour in this case. Most all of these are lacking from the modern diet. If you add to that breakfast is the easiest meal to skip of the day if you were counting calories trying to diet and lose weight, you understand why many women have gallbladder issues. It's not the only reason, but I think it's more common now because breakfast, if anything, is some sugary cereal with low-fat milk, or even worse, soy milk or something. Nasty, horrible for you stuff. Back when people used to get up and eat some honest-to-goodness bacon and eggs, have a bitter cup of coffee with it, they didn't have as many issues. Now, if you really do need to cut calories, I always, and you're concerned about your gallbladder health, or if you have gallbladder issues, really one of the most effective things I've found is a change in diet, specifically breakfast, so that the gallbladder will purge in the morning. And the easiest way to do that if you're calorie conscious is to have a salad in the morning with a vinaigrette. You get natural oils. Sure, you can use olive oil, but if you use sesame oil is also incredibly good for the liver, so you can actually help your gallbladder and liver at the same time. With some bitter greens, some vinegar, which is sour, Otherwise, if you don't want to go that far, I mean, shoot, like I said, I love eggs and bacon. I don't, so I think most men do, which is why most men don't have issues with the gallbladder. If you really just want to get kind of fanatical about things, have a little bit of bitters, and a spoonful of sesame seed oil, teaspoonful, I mean, it doesn't have to be that much, and a dill pickle. It's like, other than the calories from the oil, the sesame seed oil itself, which, from certain oils like that, we don't really have to count them when we're counting calories because of the way the body processes them. You're getting almost a 0-calorie breakfast, which will still flush the gallbladder and be incredibly good for the liver, especially if you can put a cup of coffee with that, or a cup of tea, or something like that. No sugar. Stay away from the sugar. That's really the biggest problem, and really the biggest cause of most of our modern diseases is excess consumption of sugar. But as I said, this herb seems to be tailor-made for gall issues. So, specific indication uses bilious colic, other forms of colic with spasmodic contractions, yellow skin and jaundice, conjunctiva with nausea and colicky pains, tongue-coated, paroxysmal abdominal pain, that means spasmodic abdominal pains, and stomach deranged, basically can't, your digestion's off, like they said in chronic alcoholism and such. Frequent small flatulent alveine passages, colic with tenderness and pressure, sharp abdominal pains made worse by motion. So, very, very useful herb. Now, in Native American use, I found mention of it in the Lumbee medicine. The Lumbee used wild yam as a diuretic, emetic, expectorant, and in treatment of urinary pain by making a tea of the boiled root. Many Lumbee women will also drink this tea to relieve pains of childbirth, as they mentioned, afterbirth pains. The wild yam was boiled down to make a salve for the treatment of rheumatism. First mention of that we've seen. Around 1920s, when Jethro Kloss was really reintroducing the eclectic school to America, he said, description and use of wild yam, as he called it. This is really, there are 2 or 3 actual members of the Dioscoriae family that fall into this general category. There's Velosa, sanguinaria, the Chinese yam specifically, but generally it goes under the title wild yam, and that may be more how you know it, and you may know it for a reason we'll get into in a little bit. It has some hormonal qualities, hormonal mimicking qualities, but in 1920s, before any of that was known, the Jethro Kloss said it was antispasmodic, antibilious, diaphoretic, and hepatic. So good for muscle spasms and cramping, good for the gallbladder, helps with fevers, and good for the liver. He said it was very relaxing and soothing to the nerves, useful in all cases of nervous excitement, will expel gas from the stomach and bowels, and good in cholera. Useful in neuralgia of any part. That's very important. Neuralgia is like probably the hardest pain to treat. So good for neuralgia in any part. Good for pains of the urinary tract. One of the best herbs for general pain during pregnancy. Taken during the whole period of pregnancy. Again, I don't recommend herbs during pregnancy. If you know a good midwife or a trusted herbalist who is an expert in those issues, ask them about it. As it does have some progesterone type properties, I would be a little cautious. I'm just saying. But 1920s is what they said. It will allay nausea in small frequent doses and may cause vomiting if taken in larger amounts. Combined with ginger, it would be a great help in preventing miscarriage. So 1920s they said it would help prevent miscarriage. Use a teaspoon of wild yam with 1/4 teaspoon of ginger. Also good in combination with squaw vine for use during pregnancy. That's we into that another time. That's a very, very good herb, native to the Americas. Valuable in ailments of the liver, spasms and rheumatic pains. And plants for future, this is more modern, says. Medicinal use of the Chinese yam. The Chinese yam, called shanyao in Chinese herbalism, is a sweet, soothing herb that stimulates the stomach and spleen and has a tonic effect on the lungs and kidneys. The tuber contains allantonin. Allantonin is the same thing that's in comfrey. So we want to be a little careful with allantonin because if you're predisposed to cancer, it may stimulate tumor growth. Now, that has actually not been clinically proven to the best of my knowledge. I think it's a little overblown, the warnings, but I want to put that out there just in case. The cell proliferant that speeds the healing process. The root is an ingredient of the herb of 8 ingredients, a traditional Chinese prescription to treat hyperthyroidism, nephritis, and diabetes. The tuber is anthelmintic, means it helps get rid of worms, basically parasites. Digestive and gently tonic. It is used internally in the treatment of tiredness, weight loss, poor appetite, poor digestion, chronic diarrhea, asthma, dry coughs, frequent or uncontrollable urination, diabetes, and emotional instability. It is applied externally to ulcers, boils, and abscesses. The tumors are harvested in the autumn and can be used raw or baked. The leaf juice is used to treat snake bites, scorpion stings. The root of most, if not all, members of this genus contain diosgenin, I guess. I've never heard it pronounced, which is widely used in modern medicine or in order to manufacture progesterone and other steroid drugs. These are used as contraceptives and in the case of various disorders of the genitourinary organs, as well as a host of other diseases such as asthma and arthritis. Now that's how most people know wild yam today. It's the saponins of the plant, can be used to replicate hormones. In its natural state, it is a very useful herb. It is only in a something made in a lab, I'll just put it that way, that it can be used as a contraceptive. And I believe that it was originally studied to be used as a for the same purposes, essentially the same properties, used as an insulin, but was found to work very well to replicate progesterone to be used as a contraceptive. It's actually not a very healthy way to use the plant, actually. It comes with a lot of side effects, and of course there are moral issues and all that. But that is how most herbalists know of this plant now, which is why I think it's very important to talk about the actual herb in its raw state. The actual herb that you can pull out of your backyard if you live in most of the U.S. and most of North and South America, actually, and use it for so many in so many ways that have nothing to do at all with contraception. It's it's really a shame to me that the herb has been so associated with one use, that the rest has mostly been forgotten, although you will see it in certain herbal hormonal menopausal type products for the same reason. But anyway, the cloverleaf, let's see, the Cloverleaf Farms Herbal Encyclopedia tells us, caution it to not be used during pregnancy, which is actually what I just thought when, that's, when Jethro Kloss recommended it, I was thinking, I don't think that's a good idea. They said, native to North and Central America, the wild yam has now become naturalized in tropical, semi-tropical, and temperate climates around the world. It is a deciduous perennial vine climbing to 20 feet, and its has heart-shaped leaves and tiny green flowers. You actually see it all over the place once you start recognizing it. The tuberous rhizome is a pale brown, cylindrical, and twisted. They repeat what they said about Shen Yao. I just love trying to pronounce Chinese words, knowing I'm doing it very wrong. And my old Chinese friends, when I was doing traditional Chinese medicine, would have laughed at me or scowled at me very hardly. Anyway, the diosgenin was identified by Japanese scientists in 1936 and this paved the way for the synthesis of progesterone and of such corticosteroid hormones as cortisone. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yes, it was very important in learning how to synthesize cortisone. It was used in the first contraceptive pill, despite the fact there is no suggestion that the plant was used as a contraceptive in the past. So, in its natural form, it does not work as it does in its synthetic form. And again, it's really the saponins in the plant that are used. They had tried using yucca root. They'd used all kinds of stuff trying to figure out how to use it. But the wild yam turned out to be the better of the natural, and now everything's synthetic. But well, for the most part, some wild yam is still used. But anyway, traditionally though, this is back to Cloverleaf Farm. And this is actually the way I started learning about this plant was actually an herbalist from South America got in touch with me and started telling me how the plant was used traditionally in Central America. And yeah, that's actually what started me looking into this herb. And it just really, like I said, this is one of those that you're going to start spotting everywhere. It's amazing. And so many people ask me about gallbladder issues. But traditionally in Central America, the plant has been used to relieve menstrual, ovarian, and labor pains. The Maya and Aztecs were known to have used wild yam to relieve pain. Wild yam is typically used for rheumatic conditions, digestive complaints, gallbladder colic, dysmenorrhea, and muscle cramps. It is particularly effective in treating irritable bowel syndrome and diverticulitis. That is another just running rampant through America right now because of our horrible diets, all the synthetic foods we eat, all the antibiotics we're taking. People are having irritable bowel syndrome like crazy, and diverticulitis even. And wild yam is quite good for that, along with other herbs, Canada fleabane, it's a rigeron, yarrow, sage. Sage is quite good. American calamus is excellent. But anyway, I think the wild yam would be more soothing, whereas the others are more astringent and kind of pull down the inflammation. Many of the Dioscoriae species have hormonal action and are used both as food and medicine. Shanyao is an important tonic for the spleen and stomach and is prescribed for tiredness, weight loss, and lack of appetite. It counters excessive sweating, frequent urination, and chronic thirst. In Chinese medicine, it is given for chronic coughs and wheezing. Recently, the plant has been proclaimed a solution to menopausal symptoms and to treat menstrual problems. Modern herbalists are aware of its hormone-like effect and recommend it in various forms, including creams and deodorant. Very true. Probably the most common way you're going to see wild yam used in an herbal form in modern stores, I guess, where you might go to buy an herbal product, is going to be in a menopausal formula. But it has so many uses and literally grows all over the place. Once you learn to spot it, you're going to see it everywhere. You're just going to learn. You need to learn to identify it because it can kind of look like some of the plants we call sarsaparilla. It's just one of those vining weeds that people usually spend more time trying to pull up and eradicate, which you don't get anywhere pulling vines. You just break them off, they come up tenfold. So anyway, learn to use your weeds. That's kind of the point of this whole book, which is the medicinal herbs, the medicinal weeds and grasses, or the medicinal weeds and grasses of the American South, which I guess if you order any of my books from Amazon, you can probably still get them for by Christmas, but I can't guarantee anything I send you is going to get there fast enough. Anyway, y'all, have a great week. Go eat too much. Enjoy your friends and family. And look forward to some of the stuff I'll be posting on Judson Carroll Woodcraft. Some of the items I'm going to be making using my great-great-grandfather's, well, at least my great-grandfather's tools. A couple of them actually may have been my great-great-grandfather's tools, come to think of it. These are very old hand tools, and you're going to see things on there that are really one of a kind in 2024. Well, 2024 soon, won't it be? By the time I get things posted for sale, it'll probably be 2024. So anyway, y'all, have a great week, and I will talk with you next time. You'll probably hear my voice on Christmas Day if you listen to the podcasts. And I'll give you a couple of really great recipes then. I got a couple. The next one I'm going to give you, one of them's really simple. They're both actually simple, but one of them's really super easy. You probably got the ingredients in your own kitchen right now, and it's a true Southern classic. The other one is a bit more, I won't say complex, but you may have to have a few more things on hand. Super special holiday dish that you're going to enjoy well into New Year. I actually debated putting the recipe for this one out. I have a friend in California who's a chef and a master baker, and I said, what do you think? Is this going to be too, on the one hand, rustic, and on the other hand, chefy for the average person? And she said, no, I think, you could do a few substitutions, and I think anybody can make this, and it's gonna blow their minds. And I'm like, well, all right. She actually cooks for real people. I mean, she, is actually in the commercial realm, whereas I'm, more a home cook and a cookbook writer. I haven't catered in a long time. I haven't worked in a commercial kitchen in a long time. She does every day. So, she gave it the go ahead. So I'm gonna give you that one. And I think if you try it once, when you hear it, you may think, I'm not sure, but when you try it, you're gonna love it, and it's gonna impress everybody. Everybody. I mean, it's pretty for one thing. It's a really attractive dish, and the flavors are phenomenal, and the scent is unmistakable. So look forward to that one. Anyway, y'all, stay warm, stay dry. It's raining buckets here right now. It's going to snow tomorrow. So stay warm and dry, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Well, I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.